What is up, future bitch boy Millsy? Back with Hometown Commander, back for another episode of Millsy Brews, the show where I brew my version 1.0 deck list of the commander in front of us on my quest out brew the magic world. As always, that link is going to be down in the description for you below for the deck list. So I would really appreciate it if you could like, comment, subscribe. Look at any of those links in the description, interact with the video in any way that you can. I'd really appreciate it. But we're finishing out the week with another one of our tribal commanders from Bloomburrow in Clement the Worrywort. A 3-mana Simic Frog Druid with Vigilance. It says whenever Clement or another creature we control enters, we can return up to one target creature we control with less mana value to its owner's hand. And all of our frogs can tap for a green or a blue, but only to cast a creature spell. Well, frogs are an interesting tribe in Magic, mostly because they've never really gotten a ton of good support, but Bloomburrow has added a ton, including a lot of really fun blink support, and that's what or bounce support, and that's really what we're trying to do. Bounce frogs back to hand, replay them for their effects, and just amass value on our board. There's a couple ways we can do that. There are a couple frogs that add +1/+1 counters, or other cards that can add +1/+1 counters to creatures, and there's a lot of support in Simic for that, so we're going to do that. We can just either bounce frogs back to hand or just simply blink them, exile them, bring them back in. That's really useful as well and can continue to get those ETB triggers. And the best part is then our frogs tap for mana can help us recast those frogs that we bounce back to hand. There's a lot of nuance, there's a lot of ways to do it, and that's what we're going to try to do. So getting into the frogs, there's a lot of new frogs. And I've said it before the last 2 weeks with Bloomburrow, and I'll say it again. It's really cool to see common and uncommon frogs being playable in this deck and being key pieces to the deck. One of them, interestingly, is something like Clifftop Lookout. When it enters, you reveal cards from the top till you hit a land, put that on the battlefield tapped, and put the rest on the bottom. This is cool because you can be getting another land every turn by just bouncing this back and replaying it or blinking it and kind of, starting to get those lands out of the deck and make sure we're drawing into more and more gas. Dour Portmage feels really good, and I'm sure this will see a lot of play in other blink decks. But whenever one or more creatures you control leave the battlefield without dying, you draw a card. So if we bounce it back to hand or blink it, we're going to draw a card. It's going to allow us to help churn through our deck, find the things we really need. But then for 2 mana and tapping it, we can just bounce another creature back to hand if we want to. I like this because then without Clement, there's still a way for us to get things back to our hand if we need to. Dream Duo Entrancers is actually a really fun one because of some interactions we can do with it. So when it enters, we tap up to one target creature and put 3 stun counters on it. And if we control that creature, we draw 2 cards. This is really fun because with Clement out, Dream Duo Entrancer can actually tap down a creature and stun it, draw 2 cards, and then with Clement's ability, bounce that creature that we stunned back to our hands, effectively just netting us 2 cards and the ability to replay that frog. And that's a very useful loop to churn through cards and still being able to replay the frogs. The way we can do the triggers is Dream Duo first and then Clement second, so we can make sure we can do that. Froghemoth is going to look a little odd to some people, but hear me out. Froghemoth has the ability to bounce literally every other frog in the deck, and that's what makes it important, is because with Clement's ability, it's going to be able to bounce anything back, and then we can always bounce it back if we need to start the loop again. The problem, right, is that there's a couple 1-mana frogs, there's a lot of 2-mana frogs, but 3 and 4 mana, there's less of them. Right, so it's harder to bounce. And when we get up to 4, it's really hard to bounce those 4-mana frogs if we really wanted to. I don't see the reason why. I think a lot of the frogs we want to bounce are 3 or 2 mana. But you never know. There's the odd scenario where you just want to bounce something back that's 3 or 4 mana, and Froghemoth can do it. What I also like about Froghemoth is it has haste, meaning the turn it comes in, it can actually do something and get in for damage. It can put counters on itself, which is cool. And it's one of my favorite green creatures of all time because it held its spot in my Goreclaw deck for a long time. But it's cool to see it back here in a deck that cares about frogs, and it's a great body to put counters on because it has trample. Lily Splash Mentor is one of the new ones. For 3 mana, we can exile another target creature we control and then return it back to the battlefield with a counter on it, only as a sorcery. But again, here's a way to get another one of those ETB triggers by basically just blinking it and having it come back in. Long River Lurker is kind of interesting. It has Ward 1 and gives all other frogs Ward 1, which is great. That's helpful to stop potentially our opponents from targeting our things. But when it enters, target creature you control can't be blocked this turn. And then whenever that creature deals combat damage this turn, you may exile it. If you do, return it back to the battlefield. This is kind of cool because it kind of gives you, again, another way to blink that creature, right? It goes in and gets in for damage, and then it blinks itself. This is also useful when we start playing around with the +1/+1 counters the deck cares about, because, if we're using things like the Ozolith to hold on to those counters, have something get in. If we had to put the counters on the wrong frog, or we just have a frog we really need to blink for another ability to go off, get it in for the damage, blink it, and then start the loop again, or start the right abilities to go off again. Mist Breath Elder is a really fun one. At the beginning of our upkeep, we can return another creature we control to its owner's hand. If you do, you put a counter on it. Otherwise, you may return Mist Breath Elders to its owner's hand. It is important to know with Mist Breath that it has to return a creature. You have no choice unless it's the only creature you control. So you do have to be slightly careful with Mist Breath that you don't have it and a creature you really don't want to bounce out at the same time, otherwise that creature's getting bounced. But if you really want to take this deck and push towards that +1/+1 counter synergy like we're trying to do, there'll be some cards or ways to try to stash up those counters, worst case scenario. Splash Lasher is a 4-mana frog with Offspring 2. It says when it enters, we can tap up to one target creature and put a stun counter on it. What I like about the Lasher, and this is one of the good ones where Froghemoth comes into play to be able to bounce something, is you can play the Lasher with the Offspring, so you get the Offspring copy, and then bounce the original back, and you can Offspring it again. It's kind of nice that if we do have these frogs with Offspring, that you can take advantage of getting 2 of them instead of just 1. Seekitung Sentinel is a fun frog to play because when it comes in, you can return up to one other target permanent you control its owner's hands, and not just creatures. And this is important because there are some cards that may have ETB abilities, or we may have some enchantments that do something when they come in, or class enchantments that do something when they come in. There's a couple of different ways you can look at this ability. But what I like is it can return anything. Meaning if you want to return something bigger than it so that you can play it and return something smaller than that, Sticky Tongue can do that. And it's very helpful for that. This is also a great one to bounce back with somebody else's ability, because then you can bounce something, and keep your kind of loop of bouncing going. I don't know why I put Sticky Tongue on there twice, but apparently we did. Valley Mite Color is another frog. Whenever a frog, rabbit, raccoon, or squirrel comes in, put a counter on it. So here's a great way to just get the Mite Color bigger and bigger. It has trample, so it's going to start getting fun to deal with. And then 3 Tree Scribe. Whenever it or another creature leaves the battlefield without dying, put a counter on target creature control. So as we're doing these bounce loops, we're starting to spread the counters out. I'm not entirely sure what this was supposed to be. But, oh well, I made a mistake in the presentation, and it happens from time to time. But let's talk about bouncing and blinking. These are both ways that we can keep our frog train alive. Thassa probably makes the most sense. It's an enchantment creature god with indestructible. So at the beginning of your end step, we can exile up to one other target creature and bring it back. So blink it. And this is helpful for the little small frogs that just come in and draw you a card, or come in and put a counter on a creature. Hey, those are the perfect things we want to blink every turn, because then we can do it every turn without being worried about, screwing up other things. Splash Portal is kind of interesting. It can just blink a creature. But if that was a bird, frog, otter, or rat, we draw a card. So blink one of our frogs, draw a card. Feels great. Essence Flux at instant speed, exile target creature you control and bring it back. And if it's a spirit, it comes in with +1/+1 counter. But the nice part about these instant speed blink spells is, one, they protect that creature, right, if it's trying to get removed. But then it can potentially start some more of these bounce, frog abilities, if need be. Teferi's Time Twist, same thing. Exile target permanent, bring it back in under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step, and if it's a creature, it comes in with a counter on it. So not a bad ability as well. Crystal Shard feels like a fun one. Once per turn, we can pay 3 or pay a blue and return target creature to its owner's hand unless its controller plays 1. Well, there's 2 ways to look at Crystal Shard. We could bounce our opponent's things, but I can also bounce my thing, and I don't want to pay the 1. I want to bounce it. It means just for 1 blue, I can bounce creature back to my hand and keep, play it again, get the loop going again, which is really fun. Equilibrium, whenever you successfully cast a creature spell, you may pay 1 to return target creature to its owner's hand. So, again, different ways to look at this. We can bounce our opponent's creatures, or we can bounce ours, depending on what we need in the moment. It's kind of cool to have these play dual duty. 1 for us, or 1 potentially to hurt, right, our opponents. Well, there's a ton of frogs that care about either getting counters on themselves or getting counters on other frogs. So we're going to talk about counter payoffs. I feel like every commander deck these days cares about counters in some ways, but it's such a powerful ability. And the thing I referenced earlier in the Ozolith can just be really important. Whenever a creature we control leaves the battlefield, if it had counters on it, we put those counters on the Ozolith. In the beginning of combat, we can move all the counters from the Ozolith on a target creature. This is a great way to really soup up a creature and get it to be dangerous if we have all these counters accumulating on the Ozolith. It is a maze. We don't have to move them, but it could be very good. But the card from Bloomborough that I think I'm the most excited for a deck like this, and once you watch it happen once, you know why the card's really good, and that's Communal Brewing. When it enters any number of target opponents each draw a card, that is not something that they have a choice for. They just draw the card. And we put an ingredient counter on it for each card drawn this way. And then whenever we cast a creature, it comes in with X additional +1/+1 counters on it, where X is the number of ingredient counters on Communal Brewing. So if we can proliferate that up, it'll be more. But hey, that means every frog that coming in is coming in with 3 counters on it. And if we have the Ozolith out and we bounce one, all the counters are going to go to the Ozolith. But this is a very quick way to start setting up an enchantment we'll talk about on the next page, and or other alternate win cons in the deck with things like 20-Toed Toad or Simic Ascendancy, which we'll talk about on the next slide. But we got to talk about the card that's, in all reality, taking a lot of the Magic world by storm at the moment, and that's Innkeeper's Talent. A class enchantment that when it comes in, it'll give you the ability that in the beginning of combat on your turn and each of your combats, put a counter on target creature you control, so it gets to spread out a counter every time. When we get it to level 2, it actually protects all permanents we control with counters on them by giving them Ward 1, which is better than you think it is. You might be surprised at how often just that 1 extra mana could potentially force our opponents to stop from removing something. And then level 4, the thing that's providing a lot of combos at the moment with other things, if you'd put 1 or more counters on a permanent or player, put twice that many on them instead. So here's a way to double up the amount of counters going on our things, and once this hits level 4, it's a really great ability. But the main thing we care about as far as the counters go in an alternate win con, one of the 2 of them in the deck, is Simic Ascendancy. We can pay 3 mana to put a counter on a creature if we want to, but the real thing we care about is whenever 1 or more counters are put on a creature we control, we put that many growth counters on Simic Ascendancy. At the start of our upkeep, if it has 20 more growth counters on it, we win the game. This is a way to just build up over time, running our loop, getting counters on Simic Ascendancy, and working up towards that end. The other one, which I'm surprised I didn't put on the PowerPoint, I apologize about that, is 20-Toed Toad. It's a new frog from the Commander set where whenever you attack with 2 or more creatures, you can put a counter on it, and then whenever it attacks, if you have 20 or more cards in hand or you have 20 or more counters on it, you automatically win the game. So kind of a same thing to Simic Ascendancy. The only difference is the counters actually have to be on 20-Toed Toad, but again, works really well with the Ozolith, right, if you want to use it that way. And then Tribute to the World Tree. Whenever a creature comes in, draw a card if its power is 3 or greater. Otherwise, put 2 counters on it. A great way to just, with the Ozolith and other things, just get counters down on the creatures we control. But like I said before on the show, and I'll say it again, this is my version 1.0 deck list for the deck, and there's a lot of things we can learn in testing. And there's a couple cards that I really, really like. One of these I left out because of the cost of the actual card. The other 2 I just think are more of the abilities we want to see. Ghostly Flicker, just another one of these blink cards that could be good. It can exile 2 creatures or artifacts or lands and bring them back in. Again, could be good to protect a couple frogs or just start the loop by blinking a couple frogs. Wizard's class on the right's kind of interesting. The one thing I have noticed with the deck is it does draw some cards, and we do have some, reliquary towers and things like that in the deck to stop our maximum hand size, but it's never a bad thing to have another one. Level 2 draws you 2 cards, and level 4 says whenever you draw a card, put a counter on a creature. Really like this ability. It could probably more than welcomely come in. I'm just not sure what to take out, for it. And then the big thing that I think is a no-brainer to bring in, it's just hard when the card costs $50 to bring it into a deck where we're trying to at least have a half-decent budget, and that's the Great Henge. Costs X less to cast, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. Tap it to add 2 green and gain 2 life. And whenever a non-token creature comes in, put a counter on it and draw a card. It's a draw engine. It's a counter engine. Great Henge is so good at what it does. But I love that just for the cost and trying to, do my best to keep the deck down on cost. But getting into Playtest 1, keeping a 4-lander with that Reliquary Tower. Get our maximum hand size. Communal Brewing, Patchwork Banner, and Sunshower Druid. Probably one of our best all-star blink or the bounce frogs we want. Whenever it enters, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature and gain a life. So seems like a solid hand. We just need to get ourselves some more frogs. So we'll get land here. I don't know that I want to put the Druid in yet. Kind of raised to geez, lots of lands. So we're set, right? All we need to do is draw into some frogs. Again, not much we can do in turn 2. Clement is a 3 mana card, but I kind of feel like I want to put the Brewing down before Clement. But I guess Clement can just bounce the Druid. So I guess we'll put the Druid down and get the counter on it, just in case we need to block. I think this turn it makes sense to get the Brewing down, gave all of our opponents the cards, and put 3 Ingredients counter. So next turn, everything that's coming in is getting 3+ and +1 counters. This is an odd playtest. A lot of times I had more frogs in my opening hand than this, but that's okay. Turn 3, or turn 4, we'll play Clement. Clement's going to come in with 3 counters, and we'll bounce that Sunshower Druid again. Feels weird to get rid of that counter, but that's okay. Now Clement's a 6/6. We can always reclass the Druid, but we don't necessarily need to. I mean, I guess we have the Splash Slasher next turn potentially, but I guess it wouldn't be bad, right? You'd put another counter on Clement. The Druid comes in with 3 counters, sets us back up, and we'll go into our next turn. Turn 5, we don't have enough to offspring the Lasher, which is kind of what I'd like to do so that in the future I can bounce it back, right? So I think I'll just get the Patchwork Banner down. This will buff these guys up. Maybe Clement's an attack, threat here on turn 5. And I'm just 1 mana off Splash Lasher, so I'd rather wait. Just again, so that way I can bounce the original back if I want to with an ability. But I mean, hey, they both come in. The original would come in with those 3+ and +1 counters. But let's see. Turn 6, we don't get anything. So we'll play the Lasher. Get that copy of it. So when the Lasher comes in, I think I'll bounce the Druid. But the Lasher is still going to come in with 3 counters on it. The Offspring copy won't, because it wasn't cast. But hey, there we go. Now we got those counters going. And then, again, we'll recast the Druid. Maybe we'll put another counter on that, on Clement. Sunshower Druid will come in with 3 counters, right, because of the Brewing. Now, we're getting the buff from Patchwork Banner. We probably got a good attack here with Clement, again, starting to become a threat. Getting everything but cards. I would love a way to draw a card. This turn, I mean, I don't have anything cheeky to do. I don't have anything to put on under the Ice Crown Scepter, so we just take an attack here. I mean, we got a lot of good threats, right? We got the buff, so just take an attack and go into turn 8. Jeez. Turn 8, we draw another land. Okay, we'll just go to the next playtest. That was brutal, just getting all lands, but I think that's just the playtester I've noticed on Moxfield sometimes, just like in real life. Sometimes you flood, sometimes you get nothing but non-lands. It just is what it is, so we'll move on here to the next one. Keeping a 3-lander with Dowerport Mage, Ozolith, which is great, Kindred Discovery for some draw, and then Polywog Prodigy, which can draw some cards when our opponents play non-creature spells with mana value less than its power. So we can hopefully evolve it up and get some onto it. Alright, Froghemoth seems pretty good. It's kind of an awkward thing where do we want to play Ozolith on turn 1? I want to, right? I want to get it down and get it going, but maybe we focus on getting a tap land down this turn so we can focus on getting something else and another tap land. So I guess turn 2 I'll take off to get the Ozolith down. It feels weird, right? I want to play the Prodigy, but at the end of the day, we got to get the lands down in the order we need to get them down in. So here, I think we'll just get the Dowerport Mage down. Next turn, we can shoot to get, Polywog Prodigy down as well. This is kind of an awkward hand we're getting here, but that's A-okay. Prodigy, I guess. And it's just one of those awkward ones where I'm kind of thinking about just bouncing the Prodigy, try to draw a card, get into something else, keep the lands, keep it moving. And I can cast Clement next turn and bounce the Prodigy, but let's do it. Let's pay the 2 to tap the Prodigy to bounce it and draw Cultivate. Okay. Going to the next turn, 5 mana. Kind of like the idea of Kindred Discovery. I like the idea of Froghemoth. Let's get Prodigy down, and then let's play Clement. Bounce the Prodigy, draw a card. We get Teferi's Time Twist. Okay, I mean, again, we're probably now just like a Kindred Discovery away from just breaking this one open. So let's stick with it. Let's keep going. Braiding Pool will come in. Let's have it come in untapped here. So we'll pay the 2 life. I'm kind of thinking. Kindred Discovery and try to take an attack here maybe with Clement to draw a card. Again, I think we're, again, just probably one more, we just needed to get the mana in place so we can keep going. Play the Grove, so now we're at 7 mana. I think this could be a turn that works out for us. So Polywog Prodigy, draw a card off the Discovery. We see Kafnit's Monument, which can start tapping down things, and it reduces the cost of our blue creatures. But I kind of like the idea of I play Froghemoth and bounce something, I'm going to be at 8. Right. So let's think about this. Look at this. Do we Wicked Monument into like Poison Dart Frog? We could just cultivate and maybe attack to draw another card here. This is just a weird one. I don't know how I feel about this. I had so much better playtests playing through this than before I started recording. But it's okay. This is the awkward things where sometimes in Commander you just get odd draws. And I tell you, this is one of those decks where like sometimes it's just hard to see the lines. Sometimes I think that's what makes to me the deck interesting, is that you got to figure it out. But we'll cultivate. I've got 2 mana left. I guess I'll just play the Dart Frog, draw a card, and we'll move on to our next turn. Ooh, blank. Okay. Fortunately, no counters on the Polywog Prodigy yet. Play the Tribute. Got 6 mana. I remember my frogs can tap for mana. So, I mean, there is always that. But let's play the Froghemoth here. Bounce the Prodigy. Draw us a card. We see Nissa, who shakes the world. Our new Frog Walker, right? 3, 4, 5. And then Froghemoth actually is going to draw me a card when it comes in off of the Tribute to the World tree, right? Got 2 mana left. Play the Prodigy. It's going to come in with 2 counters because its power is less than 3. And I don't want to bounce anything there. That would draw me a card because of Tribute to the because of Kindred Discovery. I think I would be content to attack with Froghemoth if I have a spot for it. Otherwise, this playtest I think just got away from me. I'm not entirely sure what to do at this point. Never had a playtest go this awry when recording, but that's okay. I think that's important to show that sometimes decks can be very difficult. And this could just be choosing to play the wrong frogs at the wrong time, bouncing the wrong thing, right? And maybe I played my lands wrong. I mean, this just goes to show you that sometimes this playtesting can be so useful when you're trying a deck out to understand what you're doing. So I'm gonna leave it there in all of its awkwardness, and I'd love to know what you guys think of Clement. Down in the comments below, maybe what I missed. If I missed a line, tell me. I'd love to know. I'll go back and watch it and see what I missed. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time.